Hi, I'm Chris Eischen. This is the Modern Dad the Modern Dad Council. Right now, joining me today is Eric Lehman of the Game Changer Movement, and joining us a little late will be Thomas Pfeiffer from the Good Men Project. But the Modern Dad Council meets to discuss important issues around parenting, relationships, and everything else in the world around being a modern dad. So one thing that's been kind of interesting, Eric and I kind of started down this journey a few years ago, not necessarily together, but we both have our separate journeys of how we got to this moment here today. And I just found it really interesting because I had a high school friend kind of reach out to me for some guidance, and I kind of wanted to talk about that journey that we've taken that brought us to this point. The fact that we have a YouTube channel, we have our own, I have the Kick-Ass Dad podcast. You've got the Game Changer Movement that you're working on, Eric. And it's like just kind of amazing to see where our lives have come from where they began. You want to kind of start us off and share a little bit about your journey and, what it is that got you to where you are, anything that, you're really feeling right now?
Well, sure, and I really appreciate just the openness that being on this podcast has created in my life, and it's just just having this to rely on once a week, and just to know that I'm gonna get to go deep within myself, and then hopefully on the other side of whatever comes up, I'm gonna become a better dad as a result, and that feels amazing. So, and I feel that I spent the first part of my journey of fatherhood doing somewhat the opposite of what my parents did, or my biological folks did, and that was how I came into parenting, thinking, okay, I don't really necessarily know what to do with these kids, but I'm just gonna do the opposite of what happened for me, and throw that spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks.
It's fun. Can I jump in real quick? Because that's really interesting that you talk about that, because I think that's how most of us start off in parenting. It's like, I don't like that my parents did this and this, so I'm going to do the exact opposite of everything that they did. And then, our kids end up going, God, I wish my parents would have done this and this, and they end up doing, something completely different. So, I'm sorry. I just love that you hit on that, Eric, and I just wanted to comment.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's, you didn't really interrupt anything, because I'm like really present with what this is, and so, I mean, when I first, I think what's starting to happen is that, like, when we were kids, we were told to plan, just to, like, I mean, I've actually seen bumper stickers that say, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail, and at some point my life didn't go the way it was planned. Like, I was supposed to have like 2.5 kids, and the white picket fence, and the, corporate existence and strive to be some, upper manager somewhere in some corporate, what now I consider to be hell, and just, find a comfort zone and just grow it incrementally. And, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum is, like, it just, the plan was unfolding sort of beautifully in a way, except for the fact that underneath it all, like, they weren't my plans. Like, they weren't who I knew myself to be underneath. And, to this day, I'm still apologetic to my ex-wife, but, like, I married in a way so early because of all the stuff that happened in my life, that I sort of needed to prove different, or I needed to prove that I could be a father and stay, or I could be a father and, provide, or, I had so much to prove. And like, so the first few years of my parenting were all spent in prove it mode, and not really in, like, living my full contribution. It was, and I think, just to be really candid, because it's just been on my heart of late is in 2008, probably 7+ years ago, admittedly November timeframe. So, I think that's kind of a month that's alive. My mentor died. And and when I call him my mentor, he was the person who, I worked out of this truck that served French bread pizza for 7 years while I was an undergrad and a grad student at Cornell University. And this wonderful man by the name of Bob Petrillos, just, showed up in my life and just accepted me exactly as I was. And so I worked so much. I worked a lot of shifts with this man, and he was the sole proprietor of an amazing business that was, this pizza that was served at a French bread pizza that was served out of a truck, late night. And so I was able to create this beautiful relationship with him and sort of a lifestyle of service, because he taught me so much about, just how to show up for people. And even when we were, closing and someone would, walk up to the truck, in whatever state of inebriation they were showing up in, they were welcomed as if they were the first customer. And even if we were about to pull away with this truck that was mobile at the time, and we would plug it back in, get it fired up, and make sure that people knew that we were there for them. And so, and I mean, I just learned so much from him. And then when he died, admittedly, he died with Alzheimer's and early onset Parkinson's, or early onset Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And so his last few years, we sort of lost contact with each other. I used to go visit him, and we would go for walks. And I mean, this is just kind of all like coming up in my heart in a big way, but like when we worked the truck, and people from all different years would come back, as Cornell alumni and just say hi to Bob, I noticed that he had this trick. He had this amazing trick of if he had forgotten someone's name, instead of admitting that he forgot their name, he just said, do you have a new business card? What are you doing in the world now? So like he asked them for their business card. And this is kind of a sort of a windy story, but then he would grab their business card and then like weave their name back into the conversation. I just like watched that, and it was so masterful. And then I don't know, in 2006 we were on a walk together around his block in Elmira, New York, and halfway through the walk, he asked me if I had a business card, and I was like, "What?" like I had never thought that his trick was going to be used, on me, and I came home like I just realized that in that moment that was Alzheimer's and dementia showing up, and that in that moment he forgot what my name was. And like, here's a person who meant so much to me. He was the reason I didn't feel the loneliness that other students felt at this big Cornell campus, because he always knew my name. It was kind of like Cheers, and so in 2008 when he died, I showed up to his funeral, and I was in a ball of tears. I was just like, what just happened? I mean, even though I had lost touch with him for years, like he was still like the most important, one of the most important influences in my life. And I've had a lot of miracles happen. A lot of people have shown up in my world who have made me who I am. But what I noticed at his funeral is that I was burying a father figure. I was burying, not just a boss, not just a mentor, but I was burying family. Mm-hmm. And then when I looked at the other side of the church, I saw this family who, they were burying family too, but I spent more time with them over the years when he was in good health, than they had because he was a workaholic and I was becoming a workaholic. So I mean, the reason I share like that buildup of the story is that, you know, when I was in pharmaceutical sales or whatever I did, I did it in an obsessive compulsive way because he was my role model, you know, and so there was this huge aha moment where I was just like, I don't want to wind up at my funeral where my employees know me more than my kids. So I mean, I feel like, you know, that's why I went into that story, is because in that moment, that's when I said, oh wait, you know, I'm no longer going to do this what we call opposite parenting. You know, I'm actually going to show my kids who I am, and I'm going to get to know who they are, you know. So that's really when my uh, more recent transformation started. Is like, you know, I started, you know, running long distance, and, you know, for some reason it was really easy to channel him, you know, channel his energy and connect with his spirit on longer and longer runs. So, and whenever I would think to, you know, cut my run short or whatever, you know, whatever I needed one more step for, you know, I would let him, you know, be my inspiration. Um, and also, like, you know, in a way to give meaning to his passing, you know, to say, well, you know what, everything happens for a reason, even when people leave our lives. It was just important to get the lesson from that, and to say, okay, wait, you know, I can change my game, you know, to bring in my new movement. Like, I can look at parenting differently. And to be really honest, the father that I was being at the time, I was invisible other than my paycheck. You know, I made good money, but you know, other than showing up, you know, relatively late in the evening to, you know, take my suit off and sit on my recliner and watch ESPN, you know, I wasn't the dad I really knew I was capable of being. Um, and at the time, you know, it was good enough to just hand over my paycheck and be part of the, you know, the household income. But in my inner self, I knew it wasn't. You know, so like now I'm on the flip side where I'm not that good of a provider right now, you know, and I'm on a limb. I'm diving into a movement and a mission that is on a cellular level everything that I need to be and everything that my kids need to know about me. And I've never been happier, you know, and I'm starting to feel the pendulum, you know, guide towards the middle. So like, you know, now it's time to make some revenue and to create provisions for a future. And, you know, I'm ready and willing to do that. But like, you know, there none of our kids come with instructions, except for the fact that if we listen to them, they do. You know, actually, you know,
Making that connection, right?
right. So, you know, I mean, and I feel like that's why I love being one of the modern dads, because, you know, we all have different abilities to listen for the guidance that our kids, you know, have to share with us. And now I'm learning to be a more of a learner than a teacher, you know, with this generation who was born downloaded with stuff that just wasn't inherently inside me. So like, if I do, like, my best fathering is my best listening. So that's why I'm so happy, you know, to be, you know, in this group, because this is cutting edge stuff, you know, and it's what we used to do, you know, before we let others' expectations get in the way, or, you know, other self-help books tell us what fathering is to them, you know.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that, Eric. That was awesome. That really was, and I love how you talked about how just this one work coworker, or well, a boss, influenced your, I mean, basically you down this path without seemingly doing so. Like, right? So, Thomas, I want to welcome you to the program. We're kind of talking about what led us to this moment of being on, the Modern Dad Council, and Eric just kind of shared his journey and how, and one spirit had touched him so deeply to have him question the path that he was on, and it was that moment or that time in his life that led him to this moment. So could you share with us maybe a little bit about your journey and your to this moment in time? I can't hear you. Your sound's not coming through. Well, I'll let you know when we can hear you. Oh, not yet. Do you want to jump off and jump back in? Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
We got you. Yep, we got you now.
It has to be on the microphone that's hooked up to the camera.
Ah,
so,
gotcha.
So my journey to what would you call it? A more evolved sense of parenthood. There are a lot of stages on that. I'll try to be sort of as not to ramble too much. I grew up with two brothers much older than I am, 12 and 15 years older than I am, so I sort of grew up almost like an only child because they were both in college by the time I was 6. And my father was, on the one hand, a big presence in my life because he was one of these larger-than-life characters, but he died when I was 9, so I grew up wanting to be a young parent because my parents were older, because they had my brothers before I did. My mother was 40 when she had me. My dad was 38. So I wanted to be a young parent because I didn't want to die early. I wanted to be present in my kids' lives and all that. So like I felt like when I got married, I want to have kids fairly soon into that picture. So then my first wife and I tried after a couple of years and discovered that I'm infertile. I can't father biological kids myself. So we went through a lot of different possibilities and challenges and things with that, and at one point after several years sort of decided just to stop trying because there's a lot of pressure and a lot of emotional stuff that goes with that. And then when I was, ironically 37, so almost the age my father was when he had me, we have our first child, and the second one when I was 41, so they came late, and with my first son, right at the point when my ex was pregnant with him, I was involved in all these different things. I was actually about to become the president, or on track to become the president of a club in New York City, and for whatever reason, that and also a good chunk of my work responsibility was sort of stripped away. You can say it's God, you can say whatever you want, but it was almost like God is saying, nope, you're not going to be working those long hours. Nope, you're not going to be at that club all the time. You are going to be doing the dad thing, and you're not going to have a choice about it. So that was kind of one, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, message or statement that came to me in my life that said, now you have this miracle of a child in your life that you thought you couldn't have and that came late, even though you wanted him to come early, and you were going to have to focus, front and center on him. And so then, fast forward 10 or 11 years, I have been a very involved parent over that time. I got divorced from my first wife when my older son was 5 and the younger one was 1. So then I became, in a sense, more of a full-time dad while I had the kids than I was in the relationship, because when you have them and you're on your own, as you know, it's like you have them, you're on. There's no other person. You have to create that, that world for them. And then a year and a half ago, I was let go from my day job of 20 years. Right around that same time, there was a shift in the custody arrangement where I ended up taking my older son full time. So there it is again. It's like, nope, you're not going to be taking that train. You're not going to be working that job because you've got a responsibility to pick this kid up after school and to have a wholly different presence in his life. So the commitment has always been there, and the desire to do that has always been there. But I think, as a lot of us know also, we can get so absorbed in work, we can get so absorbed in our projects, and putting the priority on making the money or getting the task done or whatever it is, that we can end up pushing ourselves out of that parenting space. So at least in my experience, life intervening has pushed me back in and said, you gotta be in this space because this other door just closed for you. This other space is not there anymore. So you have to occupy the parenting space. So now, I'm working from home, trying to put together a consistent income flow and everything from that, but knowing that this is where I need to be for my kids. So that's kind of the story.
And that's awesome because you hit on such, like, that was my story. And I mean, to a degree, right? Like, life is just, the world is going to dictate certain aspects of your life, and you can fight it all you want, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want. Life really gives you what you need, not necessarily what you want or what you think you need.
Right.
And there's something about, and Eric was talking about this too, that when we step into this arena or whatever, it's a real leap of faith. Like, you're just trusting the universe to provide.
Exactly.
Or God, or I hate to put a label of God on it for the simple fact that people can twist and turn that to mean all these other things. So I like the universe because it's kind of the same idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the universe just takes over. You take that leap of faith, and for me, financially, it was like, okay, I was working at GM in the automotive industry, making a good, solid income. I take that leap of faith with this plan that I had, and the universe said, oh, as soon as you step off that ledge, sorry, but the plan that you had isn't what I had planned for you. And so we take this financial dive, and it's like, oh crap, this is getting really scary. Like, where's that lifeline at that society says I should have, and I don't have it anymore. And just before you hit rock bottom, it's like, boom. I gotcha. The universe seems to swoop in and kind of keep you going. And I feel like we're all in that same point in our lives, to where we've almost hit that rock bottom, and we're starting to, to see that scoop back up when it comes to, at least financially.
Right.
But spiritually, it's like you were down in the gutter, and it's like you've rocketed up. I mean, at least that's my feeling, is like, I feel so free, I feel so alive and energetic with life. I jump out of bed every morning, like, all of these things that I've heard people talk about, but now I'm experiencing it, and it's like, this is amazing. And then to have, and this is what kind of started this conversation, Thomas, is that for me, I had friends from high school, a friend from high school reach out to me for some guidance. And I was like, wow, like, now I have people coming to me asking for assistance or for help, and it's like, this is amazing that, I understand when I had the podcast, Kick-Ass Dad podcast, and I'd have listeners writing me, and it's like, well, that makes sense. This goes out to, 20,000 people or whatever, that somebody would resonate with me, so that I get that. But somebody back in high school, like, this is really coming to life in my hometown now.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to live it not only in the school that my kids are in and dealing with parents in that aspect, but now friends are coming back to me. So it's been a neat, circle of life or journey of life, that I've been experiencing. And Eric, shared with his mentor that got him started, and now you, Thomas, sharing that. It's like, what an amazing journey. For me, it was when I was in high school, I wanted to live that life. I had two things that I had to have by the time I was 40. Was a Ferrari F40
Yeah.
and a full Army Hummer that was bulletproof and everything else. Like, I wanted the decked out military Hummer.
Yep.
And obviously, to have the Ferrari F40 and the Hummer, I had to have a big house,
Right.
to go with that, And so that was my goal, was to just make a bunch of money. And I started working. I didn't want to go to college straight out of high school because I didn't know what I wanted to go for, and I didn't quite understand the purpose. So although I did sign up for college because my parents made me, and I went for electrical engineering, which made no sense with my personality whatsoever. But anyway, I started working in a print shop, and I was like working with this guy. Doug was his name, and he was quite a bit older than me. I was 17, still in high school at the time. And he just made this off-the-shoulder comment, or off-the-cuff comment one time, like, you're not better than me. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not better than you? And he's like, well, you walk around here like you're so much better than this place, and you're doing the same job that I'm doing. And I'm like, well, I don't mean to sound conceited or anything, but I am better than this job, and eventually I'm going to be wealthy and running some major company someday and everything. I had no idea how I was going to get there, but this job was way below me, and I was just doing it to get to that next step. I was waiting for that big opportunity. And so I had this arrogance about me and this idea that I had to have all this money and everything else. And this guy saying this to me, it really ticked me off. But it got me thinking about how people perceived me and how I carried myself. And that was like, wow, all of this, the way that I carried myself was this persona that I wanted to, this image I wanted to give off. So it's like I was going to wear nice clothes and present myself as this upstanding blah, blah, blah. And it's like, here I am working in a factory, sweeping floors. I'm nobody fancy, but yet I have this attitude or this persona like I'm some hootie tootie or whatever, right? And then my son was born, and somewhere around there 9/11 happened shortly after that. And it was like all of these events started happening in my life where I started to realize that money and that Ferrari and that Hummer weren't quite as important as I thought they were. And the moment my son was born, it was like I knew I wanted to be a present parent. Yep. My dad wasn't. He was a workaholic. Eric, you kind of hinted on that a little bit in your story, right? And I knew that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to have a funeral that nobody showed up at because I was at work all the time, And I knew I wanted to have a real strong relationship with my son that I didn't have with my father. And it was like, how was I going to do that? So I kind of accepted where I was at, and it was like, well, I'm going to have to work in this factory but I'm not going to have this fancy house and these fancy cars, and I accept all that. And so my life started with, I just want to have enough money to provide for my family and that I can be home every night. And that's all I wanted. And so I headed down that path. Well, then I found things got more and more expensive, and that the job I was in wasn't going to provide quite the lifestyle that the minimum lifestyle that I wanted to provide for my family, which was basically the lifestyle I grew up with. it's like, okay, so now I'm going to chase the next job that can pay me a little better to provide that lifestyle, and so I can still be. And anyway, I got sucked into another factory job that ended up taking 70 hours a week out of my life, and I'm absolutely miserable. I got sucked into that trap, and that trap of believing that that was the life that I had, that was the proper life to lead, if that makes sense. So now that I've broken away from that, and I've reached out, it's like, hey guys, like, this is awesome. Like, I want to tell the world and scream from the rooftops that you don't have to follow that path, that you literally can go out there and find your niche in the world and create the technology and everything that's available for us. You can create whatever you want for your life. It just takes that leap of faith. And to me, that's the coolest thing about this journey is that you step out into that faith, and yes, it's a scary thing to have happen at first, but once you really just surrender to the universe, it will take care of you, it will provide for you, and you'll be fine. But at the same time, you've got to work, right? So you've got to make sure that you're doing the things. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to be a whatever it is, and not, you have to have money coming in. And it's about, Eric was kind of talking about this too, is finding where that fit is to make that happen.
Well, Chris, one of the interesting things that you said was that your goal, your dream, was to have the Ferrari and the Hummer and all of that. And I think that is a fairly typical goal for a lot of American men. It's like, I want a fancy sports car because society and culture shows us all sorts of things that go like, if I got the nice car and I got this, then I've got the girl, then I've got, it's like it all sort of goes together in that package. But as the world shifts, and as I'm kind of looping the Good Men Project in a little bit here, as what it means to be a good, fully centered man in the 21st century, as that sort of shifts. I was thinking about that the other day. I was thinking, like, when did a status symbol and an aspirational goal become, I want to own a hunk of metal that is worth 20% less the moment I drive it out of the store, that is going to guzzle fossil fuels, that's going to cost a fortune to repair, all this, when we've got like global warming and all this environmental stuff. I mean, so as we step into this sort of new age and we see these things happening, it's like, it's not like everybody has to own a Prius or whatever it is, but to sort of set a model for responsible manhood. It's not owning Ferrari or Lamborghini. It's not owning something that gets 6 gallons to the mile or whatever it is. It's like having all of these other concerns. It's if I have $200,000 to spend on a Ferrari, I'm going to put that in my kid's college fund or whatever. And it's kind of like centering ourselves in a different way, and stripping away these aspirational goals that have been fed to us by the people who want to sell the Ferraris and sell the Hummers and sell all the other stuff that goes along with that, and say, wait a minute, I get to chart my own course here. I can set my own goals, and yeah, if I've got it to spend on that and that's something I want to do, fine, I can do that. But I don't have to buy into, what has been sort of fed to me by the media. I can make my own choices and make to say, this is where I want to be in my life, this is how I want to live.
Right. And I even think that ties into what you were saying about, putting that money into your kid's college fund. Because I think even college is something that we need to be challenging right now.
Exactly.
Um,
Put it into
or-
something for your kid's future. I mean, maybe your kid starts a business with that money instead of going to college, whatever it is. Yeah, exactly.
right. Yeah.
Well,
And start to go ahead, Eric.
No,
Sorry.
I feel like, that's the interesting thing about this particular time, in the time space continuum, because we have 4 and maybe 5 generations of our families still alive because of advances in medical technology. So we've got, on one side, families who can remember when the car was the biggest status symbol you could
Yep.
ever imagine, and you could have any color you wanted as long as it was black, and when the radio was the only way we learned about anything that was happening other than our neighbors. And now we've got this global society that we're part of, and that our kids are even more a part of. And I mean, like, I've been geeking out on TED Talks, YouTube, audiobooks, and all these things for free, right?
Mhm.
I have learned more in the past 3 months than I dare to say that I learned in probably 2 to 3 years of high-priced Ivy League education. And I loved my education, but I need the world and my kids to know that what they have available for free at their fingertips is worth looking at, And maybe because we don't get a certification, for having learned it, and having some, academics, seal of approval saying that we passed their course, doesn't mean that learning hasn't happened. So I mean, I think that there's like so many things to challenge right now, and I'm just excited about it.
Yeah. Well, Eric, one of the things that your education taught you or instilled in you, and it doesn't have to be an Ivy League education to do this, but any sort of solid, exploratory liberal arts education, is it taught you to be curious. It taught you to ask questions. It taught you that you don't have to take, something that you see or something that you read at face value, or that there can be a multiplicity of opinions about it and takes on it. So as you come out into the world from that, and you're absorbing all of this information, and you're open to new perspectives, you're open to a TED Talk that could actually change the way you think about something. Some of that is the benefit of having had, whatever your upbringing was, but also an education where you were exposed to, lots of different thinkers, and not just spoon-fed it like in like we get all through high school. Like, well, this is the history of the United States and blah 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 blah. It's like, well, wait a minute, no, we screwed over the Native Americans. Where's that in the history books? It's like whole countries based on oppression and kicking people off their land and all that. It's like, where's that in the history books?
Or what we did to Asians during World
come
War
into
II.
it with it. Huh?
I was saying, like, what we did to the Asians during World War II. You never hear a thing about that.
Right, exactly. That's all, history's written by the leaders. I mean, that's all sort of conveniently, removed. And actually, as you look at the events in Charleston and the Confederate flag and all these things that are stirred up, that is the product of that. That is the product of history being sanitized, for like the whole Civil War. There's this whole aspect of this country that looks at that conflict in a different way and denies what that conflict was really about. And so, if we can't question that, if we can't talk about that in a constructive way without people being personally offended in their patriotism, or whatever it is, my grandfather was, yeah, okay, well, so we've got to be able to talk about these things to make progress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Eric. Were you going to say something?
I'm just, I am loving this conversation because, I feel like, how does this relate to what we were supposed to be as fathers, and, I mean, you know, I'm sure we all have our own criticism of how we were fathered, and you know, and in a way, spiritually, you know, I want to believe that, you know, my folks were doing the best they could with what they had, and you know, on the flip side, you know, how much energy, I mean, and this is just a kind of a personal question, how much energy did we have to expend in order to come to our own sense of what good parenting was or good fathering was, you know, and like, and what you know, what of our family's values, of our lineage, you know, did we get to challenge along the way? You know, I mean, there's these macro systems that I'm sure we're going to be challenging, but what about the micro systems? Like, you know, what was it like to grow up as a fifer, as a as a younger fifer, you know, and you know, and how have we, you know, created our own mold, and how much energy did that take, and what kind of promises can we make to our kids, you know, along the way, to say, you know what, I now understand and I acknowledge and I recognize how much energy it took for me to break free of my earlier, you know, teachings or value systems or self-limiting beliefs and all these other things. So I'm going to do whatever I can to let my kids know that they are allowed to think their own thoughts. Not just allowed, but that I want them to. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. This has been a really cool conversation, because the whole idea of today's show is just to kind of go over, you know, our journeys, and hopefully in sharing that provide, you know, affirmations, I guess, to those that are, you know, on that journey as well, but kind of stuck, struggling, saying like, you know, oh, am I supposed to be doing this, or am I screwing up something, right? And I think it's great to have somebody out there affirm what it is that you're struggling with at this point, or maybe you're not even at this point there, you're even struggling, you're just thinking about like, I'm about to be a dad, or maybe you are a dad and you're going, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a dad in today's society? How do we show up as the best version of ourselves? How do we you know, provide that example to our kids, and through the experiences that we've had, but yet without like saying this is the path that you need to follow. Well, that's one thing I really struggle with, is that, you know, with my son, he's 14, and he's like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that, and he has very clear goals that he has set for himself. Right. But I see like where his real interests tend to lie, and so I wonder if how good his choices are in what he's saying that he wants to do or be in life. Does that make sense? And so it's like, no, Michael, this is what you really should be doing. And I'm like, no, stop it. You can't sit there and tell him what he should or shouldn't be doing. Like, let him be his own person. But still, in this space and being on, you know, the Modern Dad Council and running a Kick-Ass Dad podcast, all that stuff doesn't make me perfect or an expert at this, you know, going through those same struggles that everybody else might be going through. It's just that now I have a place that I can come to say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and I've got a group of guys that can say, you know, I feel where you're coming from, and when I was going through that struggle, or some people that I knew, or this is some things that you can do, you know, and it's just a soundboard to kind of bounce your feelings and ideas off of. And I think that was my vision for this show, was to be that soundboard for people. You know, so write in, talk to us, tell us what you're struggling with and going through, and maybe we can give you some advice based on all of our experience. But you know, we're not experts. We're not, you know, we're not in your shoes, and so we can't tell you this is how you do it.
Well, and I also just think that you know, when you brought up the point about, you know, all of us sort of taking the leap of faith, you know, I mean, sometimes we get pushed onto our leap of faith, you know, and sometimes, you know, sometimes we take it in advance, you know, and, you know, I guess what's interesting is that, from my corporate experience, I was witnessing a whole bunch of middle managers that, perhaps I was, about to, climb into. And I saw those middle managers doing silly things just to justify their existence. They were just they were showing up just to make sure that people knew if they were taking attendance that they were doing what they were supposed to do, and I guess that, to extend that metaphor to fatherhood, like, what does it mean? Like, I don't want to show up as a middle manager with my kids, and I think that's the whole point, is that, like, I don't want to just do what society or some other big boss in the sky says is good parenting, and I mean, a lot of new philosophy says less is more. Like, the more interdependent and independent our kids become, the better. Our kids are born as entrepreneurs. They're not born as apprentices, in a way. Like, they're born with pure curiosity. And, when you see them play in the sandbox, I mean, I watched my daughter paint, 6 pictures this morning of, we're creating a video game platform together, and she's like, this is what it's going to look like, and this is what level 1 looks like, this is what level 2 looks like. And it's not like I was telling her, like, I was asking her, and it was just great to watch their own creativity show up without telling them what it's supposed to look like. And this supposed to and this should word, holy cow, how many hours and trips to psychiatrists and psychologists have been spent on this word should, and, what does it mean to be a good father? Like, I mean, we're going to spend the rest of our lives answering that question. On the flip side, we just breathe 3 deep cleansing breaths, and we know. Like, right. I think that's the interesting part.
That's part of that surrendering, right? Like,
totally. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's the hardest part for me a lot of the time. It's like, I just gotta let go and turn it over to the universe or whoever's in control of all this, because there's too many coincidences for it to just be, I don't know what it is, I guess. But.
And I think, in a way, I mean, perhaps it's in an inverse, is like, if we do it really right, they don't thank us, they thank themselves. You know what I mean? And, like, How does that feel? Like, in a way, like, going in full surrender, knowing you may never really get the thank you for the way you actually showed up. But the thank you get is by watching an independent child go out and become, whoever they are in any given moment that they get to be who they are, and how cool would it be to give that gift to our kids, to just give them the gift of themselves, because that wasn't a definite when we were growing up. And I'm just going to speak for myself, but, like, as soon as I was becoming my own person, I was an artist. I loved drawing. And there are a lot of people who would always say, how are you going to make money doing that? And I'm like, oh, whew, what a buzzkill that was,
Yeah. Thanks, naysayer.
Right.
Like, you can't be this, you can't be that. Pushing their limited beliefs on you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we all have dealt with that. One of the things that really surprised me, which I don't know, this sounds bad, but I didn't really feel a lot of support in a lot of the decisions I made from my parents. So when I made the decision to quit the automotive industry and to, like, take that leap of faith, like, my parents were like, yeah, go for it. I was like, what? Wow. And they've totally supported me this whole journey. And that, to me, was like, whoa, I thought for sure they would have been the first ones to be the naysayers. But it was like something with me taking this step. My mom just saw this joy in me that she hadn't seen in years, and was like, yes, I got my son back.
Wow.
So that was pretty powerful, and our relationship has just blossomed since then. It's like she comes over all the time. I see her. She's out right now kayaking with my son.
Oh,
It's like, isn't that awesome? Like, to have that relationship that she calls me up in the mornings, like, hey, you care if I pick up Michael and go kayaking? Like, nope. That's awesome. And it wasn't that she didn't call before because she was afraid to. It was just that.
Going in and out here. So,
Oh, all right. Go ahead, Thomas.
I think we lost Chris. Are you still there, Eric?
I'm still here.
Yeah, I'm here. I got you, Thomas. Did you want to go ahead? Is Thomas breaking up, or is it me?
I saw you and heard you the whole time.
Okay. I think you might be breaking up, Thomas. Did you want to talk? I think you're breaking up, Tom, because I can't hear you. But oh, I thought Thomas was talking.
I'm here, but it's breaking up.
Okay. Well, go. Did you have a point you wanted to make real quick? All right. Well, I can't hear you, Thomas. So I'm gonna wrap up.
Okay.
I think this connection's getting
Yeah.
spotty on us. So,
All right.
So this is a good talk. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Thomas Pfeiffer, for joining us today, and join us next week.
Talk to you next week.
All right.
All right.